Thank you for joining us this afternoon. I did present on some of the challenges that we were facing in the OCRE project a few months back to the GA, and I promised to follow up with an Infoshare to discuss the status kind of in more general terms. And just to introduce Monique, who joined GÉANT a few months back as a procurement specialist. She will be discussing the status of the project. I'll just be opening up with some context, and you guys might have heard this before. Certainly if you are CTOs, you'll be hearing it again next week, but just to kind of set the scene in terms of why supporting these digital services is so important to this community. So I'll kind of move ahead and just talk about this. So essentially the observations made here are observations made, we track Gartner, we talk to all of the European NRENs, we talk to ArdNet, we talk to Internet2 Canary, we talk to telcos through the OCRE project and the broader EOSC environment. We engage with research institutes in terms of opportunities for funding, and they feed back on the kinds of services they're looking to use. So I just want to talk a little bit about the scene. And when I talk about services, these are not necessarily commercial services. These may also be community developed services. I know that many of the NRENs have got their own infrastructure that their member institutes can consume. So it's all of that quite broadly. We also recognize that in Europe, the NRENs are a very diverse group. They're funded differently, they're resourced differently, they have different communities. So just kind of keep an open mind when we're having this discussion. But back in 2016, when we ran the original cloud framework, we saw the NREN as being quite central to this process. And essentially the conversations that we were having through the NRENs with the institutes is about lift and shift. So all of the workloads that were in institute data centers, we were talking about lifting and shifting these workloads from the on-premise data centers into cloud data centers, either community or commercial cloud data centers. And obviously the 2016 framework was focused on being able to easily procure commercial services where necessary. But it really was essentially a lift and shift. We spoke about moving backups into the cloud and that kind of thing. What we're seeing with the current OCRE framework is that the demand for moving workloads from on-premise data centers into the cloud is changing slightly, and there is a far bigger appetite in terms of the consumption of platform and software as a service. So where the workloads that were on-premise maybe have been lifted and shifted into a cloud data center, those workloads may no longer be driving the same kind of benefit for the institute. And the institutes are looking to consume more platform and software as a service. And obviously there are still a lot of workloads they do need to maintain in a virtualized infrastructure. But we're seeing some of the institutes start consuming commercial bandwidth in addition to the NREN's bandwidth, and certainly 5G is a big driver, I think, of this. And we're seeing a lot of the institutes using software-defined wide area networking to ensure that the bandwidth is being applied to the strategic workloads as a priority. And that is quite an interesting observation, because that seems to be being picked up really quickly by the institutes. And then if we look forward 5 years, and we talk about our strategy as the GÉANT community and the NRENs, we're moving more and more towards a world where everything becomes consumable. So in 5 years' time, there will probably be very few, if any, workloads on premise. There will probably be very few workloads that are still maintained and supported as workloads in infrastructure as a service. And the academic and research communities will be consuming more and more platform software solution as a service. And we're definitely looking forward to those trends where even your compute and storage comes packaged by a platform with value add. So we're moving at an incredible rate of innovation towards a services supported enterprise at both the academic and the research institutes. We're going to be seeing more and more commercial 5G moving towards 6G in 2028. Software-defined wide area networking is going to become more the norm than the exception as we see right now. And the NREN is going to be doing various different things. I saw Jan Meyer present yesterday on the NREN as a conduit for the transferring of huge data sets, so huge data from place to place. So the landscape keeps changing, which is at the current rate of innovation to be expected. If you look back at all the changes you've seen in the services that are available and the deployment of these services over the last 10 years, you only have to look 4 years ahead to see the same kind of rate of change. And that's just because technology enables technology and the rate of innovation is very high. If we look at what the European Commission is asking us to do, in OCRE, they've asked us to help startups. So researchers become startups, become SMEs, and commercialize their services around Earth observations. They would be consuming Copernicus data and they would be adding a lot of value to this. And we're helping them develop commercial models so that the researchers can consume their services. If you look at the broader EOSC landscape and the EOSC Future project, the European Commission is asking GÉANT and the NRENs through the digital innovation hubs to reach out with co-development, co-innovation opportunities to the SMEs and help them commercialize services that are specifically requested during calls from the research community. So we are looking at kind of a blend between commercial community, but moving more and more towards commercial services and smaller services, more bespoke services that are focused on this community. Okay, in terms of OCRE and certainly moving forward with any kind of commercial service that we support, in OCRE, all of the platforms that are represented on the framework have been tested by CERN using the Helix Nebula workload testing. All suppliers are bound by GDPR regulations, and with the Schrems II ruling, that's becoming more and more a complex discussion, but we are supported by the suppliers, the European resellers of American suppliers, and then the European platforms like Orange and T-Systems. In-country support and call-off. So if your institutes are consuming through OCRE, they're getting really, really good support in country. And that was the basis for the lot structure of this procurement. There are peering POPs under review. So where we don't already have peering with the platforms, we are in the process of putting that peering in place with all these platforms. We negotiated data egress waivers. And we do have licenses for the various cloud interconnect softwares to assist the institutes with connection. Trust and identity. All of the platforms support the protocols that are necessary in order to use EduGAIN. So the GÉANT Interfederation, and GÉANT has actually changed the registration process so that these suppliers are currently doing centralized registrations onto EduGAIN and no longer needing to use a national route. The suppliers all have great big SOC, security operations centers, and they track threat surveillance on their huge networks and respond to that surveillance in a very agile way. So these are your workloads on these platforms are very secure. The community has support. These suppliers have agreed to give 3 annual supplier workshops. We're working with the NRENs to help facilitate these. We've got additional discounting. And then obviously the contracts have been handed over to the GÉANT work with the GÉANT project, GÉANT 4.3, work package for the contract management group for support. And obviously there are a number of the NRENs involved in these efforts. We work closely with the GÉANT project to ensure that we are focused on what researchers, on what research needs in terms of data sovereignty, in terms of hosting in Europe, et cetera, et cetera. We're driving green computing initiatives. Some of the online tools we've made available to the institutes allow them to select the greenest possible platforms for use. And again, this is all driving agility and SLA. Okay, the role of GÉANT and the NRENs in all of this. We have a catalog of cloud and digital services on the OCRE site that is consumable via API by GÉANT, the GÉANT catalog, and by each of the NREN catalogs. We're encouraging the NRENs to develop relationships with the markets in country, to provide access to the call of agreements, to support the local cloud forums, evangelize the services, host the supply trainings. We spoke about the webinars, communicate funding calls for institutes, provide support for local buyer groups. So where you do have institutes that are collaborating and the NREN can provide any support to them, we ask the NRENs to do that. And then what's really important is that through OCRE, the suppliers give the GÉANT contract management group quarterly reporting, and we're able to dashboard consumption trends. So in your country, you would be able to get a dashboard showing the current consumption rate, who's consuming, what they're consuming, and what the kind of trend going forward looks like. And that's a very, very valuable thing to have in country. And these initiatives also help GÉANT and the NRENs drive strategy and relevance. Now, we know that the various NRENs have various different services. We know that some of the NRENs see commercial services as competitive to their own services. And we're not suggesting that it should be any other way. But what we are saying, and through these open calls to researchers, we've seen that in all countries in Europe, there are institutes that are consuming from these platforms. They are procuring, even if it's simply the G Suite or Microsoft Office or some Azure services, or they have some workloads that are becoming redundant sitting in AWS. I know at GÉANT we use AWS to host Open Up to You. Whatever is being procured, if we can encourage our institutes to procure through OCRE rather than run their own tenders, even if commercial services are not on the NREN's strategic forecast. If your institutes are procuring through OCRE where they need to procure these services, then again, you are able to report on what consumption is taking place and to help drive your strategy. The institutes will be getting the best possible deal, and they will be grateful to the NREN community for that. So it is really, really important that even though we are aware that there is some tension between the community developed services and the commercial services, and we see that as being, just the way it is. If any of your institutes do need to procure these services, please encourage them and support them to procure through OCRE rather than run their own tenders, because it is going to help you report more accurately on the community's consumption in your country. Okay, at this point, I'm going to hand over to Monique and just ask her to let me know when she needs me to flip the slides. But Monique, if you wouldn't mind just introducing yourself, a little bit about your background and why you're here at GÉANT helping us with this stuff.
Well, thank you, Dave. Well, my name is Monique Pellenkopf. I'm the new procurement specialist. My background is I'm a lawyer. I'm specialized in tendering law, European tendering law. And I just started a bit over 2 months ago at GÉANT. I'm really enjoying it. It has a terrific people to work with, a really interesting information and interesting topics, and also really great challenges. So I dove right in actually, and I'm also maybe I can tell you a bit about this, because what happened is that when I started, the framework we agreed upon with 473 contracts and suppliers. Well, that actually happened last year, but once I started, we are actually kicking off now, so things are getting up to speed. So this framework has been tendered last year within all the general principles of the European tendering law. So I was very much pleased about that. That means that all transparency, non-discrimination, inequality, and great competition within the EU internal market. And creating a fair level playing field for all. Actually, that happened already. And so what we're now doing, we're trying to get the best out of that framework. And we're doing this by creating mini competitions that actually falls within the framework. And as a result of those mini competitions, we get call-off contracts with the awarded bidder of that mini competition. So what happened is that we had some projects already awarded, funded projects from our community, from the institutes, and we're now we're organizing mini competitions within the framework for those funded projects. So currently there are 3 running, and one is almost running. So one of the first that actually is now a running mini competition is now in the evaluation phase. So this means that we're getting proposals. We already got proposals, and we're now figuring out which one is providing the best and most ideal solutions and added value for this institute. To be able actually to be able to reimburse or to organize that the payment of the project will be will be done. We are working with voucher contracting. This means that we are the ones, GÉANT is the one that pays within the framework, and the T's and C's of that framework pays the supplier, and we get a voucher we can provide to the institute of the awarded funded project. And the institute will get the voucher and actually use that to provide to the supplier, and which the supplier can start the services they have been purchasing. So this is actually what is happening right now, and also will hopefully continue in the nearby future. So let's have a look. Yeah, so this is what we do. We organize and we facilitate the relationship between the suppliers, all 473 of them, and the institutes and their needs. So these mini competitions are actually, I think, the general principle basis, but also a direct award. So that's actually picking a specific supplier is possible within the restrictions of the European tendering law, meaning that it is an exception, and it can only be done if there's not another chance to actually switch within suppliers. So if there's no other way, you can go to our direct award. The other one, please, Dave. So what did we buy within the framework? So this is our portfolio. I think it's also good to press that it all falls within the T's and C's protection of the framework, so meaning that it falls within the GDPR and falls within the contractual clauses, and all this security is actually built in the framework, which makes it a really good and secure environment to place in mini competitions and to actually get good ideal solutions to actually provides the necessary service you need. So this is so these are the things that are offered within the framework. Well, you can just read it yourself, but it's a developing thing. So these are actually, I think, the basics. And now, as we are consuming also and using the framework more, there will be an in-depth development within the framework of these things in the portfolio that are provided by the suppliers. Next, please. So again, I don't know if you have any understanding, but for this tender that we did on the framework was quite impressive. It was huge, and it has been published on the European tendering electronic daily, and it's a site actually that is quite. It was really hard to work with because all the 473 contracts it was the idea was that we had to do it by hand. So it was quite a challenge to be able to also publish the awarding, but we did so we're quite happy about that. But the outcome is all those contracts, 40 lots, meaning actually all the countries that are involved. So every country has its own lot, and in every lot there are several suppliers that are awarded within that framework. So what happens when you pull out a mini competition within that lot? For example, the Netherlands, we just did that. We then provide the mini competition, and then 16 suppliers already committed themselves to the frameworks, TNCs, and provided us a really good discounts, are responding, and they're providing us with the ideal solutions and the most added value towards the institute. So this is what is happening, and hopefully will happen again and again within those 4 years. We have this framework going on, making the use out of it after all the efforts. Yeah, next one. So we still actually hopefully we finalized it today, so that's exciting. So what happens is that of course funded projects are paid, and this is why we're also tendering it within all the general principles of the European tendering law, but it's funded by public money, and public money it has to be spent well, but also doesn't have to be overtaxed. So what the discussion we had up to now, hopefully, with the Dutch tax authority, is that we try to actually, we try to convince the Dutch tax authority that once we paid VAT in the country where the services are consumed, we don't have to pay again VAT in the Netherlands where GÉANT is based. Because we are paying for, we are organizing the payment, we distributing the funding. We don't want to be the one also paying again tax over the fundings. Because tax is already paid in the country where the services are consumed by the institution. So this is a discussion has been I think we had started in April and hopefully finalized now, because it seems that the Dutch tax authority is, after a lot of thinking and reconciling, are trying are going to give their green light. So hopefully we can, we started already with 3 mini competitions, but hopefully we can continue with the rest of the 11 awarded institutes of the funded projects, and making sure that everybody can, can use and can consume the ideal solutions for their problems within the institutions. So what happens is that now 3 of them are published. 1 of the mini competition is now evaluated by the institution, and we're helping them out on this. And the 4th one, so I think that's the 3rd, but it's already 4th one, mini competition is ready to go. So, but suppliers are telling us it's also a bit of a challenge for them. So we're not providing them with too many mini competitions, because we want to have good proposals, which we can evaluate and after all awards the best one. So hopefully we can continue this after we get the positive notice from the Dutch tax authority in writing, which is important. Yeah, and we can continue this good work with the mini competitions within the securities and Cs of the framework, and the good discounts. Next one. Yeah, so I think this is kind of summing up. Probably Dave also wants to add, but I think for now it is important that we are now in a position that we are actually running mini competitions from the funded projects in behalf of the institutes. And the institutes, well, one of them is now in the point of evaluating all the proposals we are getting. And hopefully, in regards with this VIT issue we had, or, wanting to spend public money well, we are now also get a green light from, like this, a green light from the tax authority that we can proceed. Also with other funded projects.
Yeah, so thanks, Monique. Just to add to that, if we do finally have this ruling in our favor, and we're able to continue with the rest of the procurements on behalf of the research projects already awarded, then what Monique, Jan, Olaf, and team have done is just in running with these first 4 procurements, they've actually set up a template where a lot of the work can be done by the institutes themselves moving forward. So the 15 projects that were awarded, we will be able to, we'll be able to kind of run with them quite quickly on subsequent procurements once we know there is no liability. So we're really excited about that. It also means, and I'm not sure what's on the next slide, but that we are going to be able to publish the DPS for Earth observation services. But this still leaves the project with very little time to distribute 4 million odd euro. So we're working with Jan and the European Commission on ways in which we can identify specific use cases, like, for example, high performance compute, or we're working with the cluster projects to identify these really big projects that would make for great case studies and easily consume kind of large amounts of this funding, because we're in parallel working on EOSC Future, and we are going to have similar initiatives and activities running kind of parallel. So we would like to kind of complete the OCRE project, as timeously as possible.
Conclusions.
Right, Monique, do you want to go through these?
Yeah. So already stated, we think after the VIT issues are solved and everything is on green, we can re-engage and engage with other of the mini competitions and the funded projects to get the best solutions for all these great projects and institutions. We will do so, we will pave the way, but we will also still really much help out all the institutions with any of the questions they have, or with providing them all the assistance they need while doing these competitions. But also now having the experience ourselves, the competitions are really easy and not. Oh, we also have a question. Are really easy for institutions to do so. So we have good trust, good hope that this will be possible. Roberto Sabatino.
Hi, Monique and David. Thank you very much for that. It wasn't very clear to me what's happening. I mean, you mentioned it there briefly. You mentioned EOSC Future and cluster projects, David. But for the future calls, where there's these 4 million euros which are available to be handed out in vouchers. Yeah. Could you clarify a bit more? What is the plan there and timelines? There's a lot of interest here in Ireland to access to apply for those funds, and I need to go back with some clearer information.
So and actually, I think an important discussion is also when we're talking about these funding activities with both OCRE and with EOSC Future, what is the NRENs role in this? And with the timeline, we haven't actually published much because we have been waiting for this ruling, because essentially if we don't get this VAT ruling in our favor, we cannot distribute this funding. But if we do in fact have the positive ruling, then we can go ahead and distribute the remainder of the funding. So what we would imagine doing is running similar open calls to the ones that we ran probably a year ago, where the NRENs actually helped us distribute the messaging to their member institutes, and we got a very good response across the entire region. Because we have so little time left during the project review with the European Commission, the European Commission was saying, well, instead of distributing the funding to many institutes and having many possible use cases and case studies, why don't we actually look at focusing on a handful of use cases when we distribute the rest of the funding, and have these really big, really compelling use cases. So we're currently looking at what that looks like. But as soon as we get the go-ahead from the Dutch Tax Authority, and it looks as though it could be this week, which is very exciting, then what we will do is we will work out what the next calls look like and how they will focus. They will not focus in terms of regions, so it will certainly be these calls will be available to researchers in all of the countries, but we may focus in terms of the science discipline or the type of service or case study that we're driving for. And I did use an example of high performance compute, where people in Europe have to line up their workloads behind a European high performance compute platform. What we've seen in the first calls is that a lot of the researchers are saying, well, the bandwidth allows, can't we simply consume hyperscale compute on demand with some of this funding? So we're kind of looking for quite specific examples, but what we'll do is we will publish a timeline, because what we need to then do is, while we go ahead with these mini competitions on behalf of the projects that have been funded, we need to then also be running these kind of open calls to give the institutes time to get proposals in. We may also be using a different mechanism where we actually make the open calls open to the suppliers across the 40 countries and say, these are the kinds of services we're looking for. These are the kinds of projects we're looking for. Why don't you reach out into the research community in each of the countries with and help us identify these case studies? But we will get the NRENs involved. We will definitely get the NRENs involved, and we'll keep you posted, hopefully in the next week or two, as to what that's going to look like. And somewhere else that it's important that we get the NRENs involved in the 15 projects that have been awarded. And if we're able to launch the dynamic procurement system on behalf of the Earth observation suppliers, we've already awarded 6 projects, those services. We do need, so for example, the University of Barcelona has been awarded. We're currently running a mini competition. We do need to start speaking to the Spanish NREN about what that looks like, what the outcomes are, and then how the Spanish NREN can get involved in supporting the research project wherever possible. Because then the resultant case study that we're going to be building through the OCRE communications team will include the NREN and whatever support the NREN has been able to bring. And these case studies will be far more meaningful to the GÉANT community as to how to engage with the NREN. As I said earlier, we do understand that all of the NRENs, within the GÉANT community are quite different to each other. They're funded quite differently. Their strategies do align, for the most part, but they also differ, to a large extent in terms of supporting these kinds of services. So we don't expect every NREN to be able to support these initiatives in the same way, but it definitely does help all of the NRENs drive relevance if they can participate. It was a very long answer to a very simple question. Sorry.
Yeah, thanks, David. I mean, certainly from a HA point of view, I'm very willing to work with you to make sure that researchers in Ireland can benefit from this, that there is demand. I'm interacting with several researchers in Ireland who are waiting for the next call, right? So great that soon we'll have a timetable at least. That's great. Thank you.
Yeah, and then maybe I'm just going to stop sharing here so that I can see as many people as possible. But maybe also just to understand that what we're doing in OCRE and what we're going to hopefully wind up doing in OCRE in the next year, we do have some extension in terms of timing. will provide for a basis for the way we distribute funding in EOSC Future. And what that will do will provide for a basis for the way the EOSC builds a business model that allows the distribution of community-based services from the European e-infras, the work that we're all going to be doing with European HPC, and all of these services, and includes some of the services that Monique mentioned in terms of platform and software, and support for the developers, platform as a service, artificial intelligence, standardized algorithm processing, all of that kind of stuff. The EOSC needs to work out how to make those services available. If they are coming from commercial providers, they're not necessarily free at the point of use. What does that business model look like? And that's essentially what we are trying to do with OCRE and EOSC Future from a business desk perspective, is try and come up with ways that these resources can be distributed. So,
and Alec actually, has also written a question. What is the further advice on research adoption funding awards that required for non-EU countries like the UK? Well, I think these adoption fund is Horizon, right?
Yeah.
So it's not your EU, but it's Horizon 2020 funding.
Yeah.
So in future calls, we certainly won't be excluding the UK. I think there were two awards made to British institutes in the first round, which we will be working with just on. And certainly there are no restrictions in terms of the geography. Obviously the EEA countries also have concerns, but at the moment within Horizon Europe, we do have the jurisdiction to distribute the funding across all of these countries.
And Jessica is now also saying this is also the question she had.
The Brexiteers, right?
But so Alec, you're unmuted.
Yes, thanks Monique, David. It was just on the final slide there, talking about the VAT ruling. It said there's also further advice that's required for non-EU countries beyond this dual VAT ruling you're waiting for from the Dutch authorities. Do you know what that advice is and what the implications are?
No, so essentially that what we've just spoken about is when we run open calls, there are no restrictions. Once we've awarded, based on these open calls, we then need to look at the institutes that have been awarded, the countries they're in, where the advice that we've got on VAT and voucher procurement applies, or where we need to get additional advice. We need to kind of treat those on a case-by-case basis. It was just something that Olaf had highlighted, that in every procurement we do on behalf of an institute, we need to make sure we're compliant in terms of rules and regulations.
Also on VAT.
Yeah. So we'll look at those on a case-by-case basis.
Great, thank you.
Any other questions? Maria is on the call, and I know, Maria, we've run surveys amongst the NRENs, and we've gotten feedback from some institutes in terms of what services are likely to be strategic to the way we move forward as a community, and where there is interest in the different services, cloud-based services, community versus commercial. And I know Maria presented on that last week, and will be presenting, I think, again to the CTOs next week. But it is interesting hearing from the NRENs in these kinds of forums and discussions, what they see these services, how they see these services as influencing their strategies as NRENs. Anything that goes above the net, what are the NRENs thinking? A couple of the institutes have contacted OCRE suppliers in a number of countries, and they have struggled, for example, to get hold of a call of contract. and understand that the code of conduct exists between the institute and the supplier, and the NREN doesn't have a role if they don't want to have a role. But you know, just in terms of making sure that your constituents, where they are having to use these services, do have access to the call-offs. And then obviously the NREN can get more involved in providing support, and we'll talk to the NRENs that you know, in which countries we have distributed funding to. But it is quite interesting to hear from the NRENs what their thoughts are in terms of these frameworks and the services. And so if anybody has any comments, you know, we do kind of appreciate them, because they do inform us moving forward.
I would probably comment just that this analysis and the results of these NREN consultations and the surveys will be also published soon, so we can circulate them in full as formal documents among the NRENs.
The conversation, I think, with the CTOs and the conversation we had with the NRENs last week, I think also focuses on the upcoming GÉANT 5 project, and how we need to address the support of above the net services in the GÉANT 5 project, bearing in mind that the GÉANT 5 project, I think, is a 7-year project, Maria. And in 7 years, you know, as I mentioned on my first slide, you know, the way in which the research and education community use services and consume services is going to evolve quite quickly. And, you know, we've spoken about the fact that the OCRE framework, you know, these contracts are only valid for 4 years. And certainly an institute at the end of the 4 years can sign a contract with the supplier for 4 years. So essentially there is an 8-year window. But we are going to have to look at, as a community, replacing the framework with something else that makes sense. And we need to, you know, start doing the analysis on that in the next 2 years, probably, to be able to timelessly replace contracts that need replacing. So this is just something for the community to think about. Any other questions? If not, I think Monique and I have done a really good job today. But
we tried.
And if there aren't any questions, you will all get 40 minutes back into your day. But please reach out to Monique and myself, to Maria and Work Package 4, if there are any questions regarding these services, regarding the work that we're doing in the broader EOSC, you know, in the broader EOSC, and where you actually feel that the NRENs should be participating more, because, you know, we obviously are resource constrained and welcome all the help we can get. Okay, guys, we'll have a good day further, and we'll catch up with you in the next couple of weeks. Reach out, you know, as I said, to either Monique or I, and enjoy the rest of your day.